this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for your attendance today. So, question now to Acting Chief Bell. To invoke the Emergencies Act requires an emergency that arises from threats to the security of Canada that is so serious to be a national emergency. As you know, Chief Bell, the threats to security of Canada has the same meaning as assigned by Section 2 of the CSIS Act. You, and to a question to the Deputy Chief, there was absolutely, during the entire period of this occupation and thereafter, zero evidence of any espionage or sabotage against Canada. You'd agree with that?
I have no information around that. We conducted no investigations into that.
No evidence of foreign influenced activities within or relating to Canada that were detrimental to the interests of Canada, that were both clandestine or deceptive or involved a threat to any person, correct?
I don't personally have any knowledge of that.
No activities within or relating to Canada directed toward and support of a threat or use of acts of serious violence against persons for the purposes of achieving a political, religious, or ideological objective within Canada, correct? No evidence?
Well, so it depends on, I think that one is more open to debate. We did see acts of violence that occurred during the convoy.
You saw acts of violence which resulted in 4 criminal code charges. There was no serious violence by way of aggravated assault, assault causing bodily harm, attempt murder, or murder. That is serious violence. You're a police officer. I'm a former Crown attorney. You'd agree with me, sir?
We did not lay any of those charges.
Thank you. And lastly, no evidence of any activity directed toward undermining by convert unlawful acts that were intended to the destruction or overthrow by violence of the constitutionally established system of government in Canada. No evidence of that.
We did not investigate or lay any charges in relation to that.
Thank you. My colleague Glenn Motz indicated, and you confirmed, that you did not request the Government of Canada to invoke the Federal Emergencies Act. Emergencies Act, sorry.
That's correct. There's no direct request made from the Ottawa Police Service.
Were you ever consulted by the federal government on its invocation?
That would be a difficult question for me to answer, as I only became the interim chief at the point which the act had been invoked. Okay. Those would have been conversations that would have occurred between former Chief Slowly, if they did occur.
Thank you. Minister of Public Safety, Marco Mendocino, on 13 occasions in the House of Commons, in committee, through the press and media, confirmed that law enforcement asked for the invocation of the Emergencies Act. You'd agree with me, sir, that both statements, your statement that you did not ask the government, and Minister Mendocino's multiple statements that law enforcement asked for it, cannot be accurate and true at the same time, correct?
So I don't know what conversations would have been had between former Chief Slowly and the federal government. What I can say is the Ottawa Police Service never made a direct request for it.
Correct. So my point is, both statements can't be true at the same time. Would you agree with me that Minister Mendocino has lied to Canadians and perpetrated that lie on numerous occasions?
I don't think I can make that statement.
Further, Minister Mendocino indicated that we got advice from our law enforcement that we met the threshold to invoke the Emergencies Act. You will confirm that you did not indicate that, did you?
No, but again, I was not involved in those discussions prior to the invocation of the Act.
And thank you to both witnesses for physically attending today at our committee. Much appreciated. Question to Commissioner. Commissioner, you recently attended the commission headed up by Justice Rouleau, and you swore to tell the truth. Remember that?
Sir, yes.
And in the course of several lawyers asking you questions, you confirmed that at no point in time did you or any member of your organization request the Government of Canada to invoke the Emergencies Act. And you accept that particular statement today here at committee, correct?
Yes, sir, I do.
Minister Mendocino, Minister for Public Safety, on 13 occasions in the House of Commons, at various committees, during media reports to the press, television, indicated that law enforcement, including the OPP, specifically asked for the invocation of the Emergencies Act. Now, both statements can't be true. You'd agree with me that someone is lying.
Well, I can.
And you're not lying, sir.
I
so
am not,
Minister
sir.
you would agree with me, Minister Mendocino is lying to Canadians.
Well, I can tell you that I am telling you the absolute truth, sir. At no point did I provide or request that the Emergencies Act be invoked.
He perpetuated this lie by indicating that not only did you request it, that you got advice or he received advice either from you or a member of your legal team that the Government of Canada had met the threshold to invoke the Emergencies Act. And that you disagree with as well, correct?
I did not provide any advice of that nature, nor am I aware of anyone from my legal team providing such advice.
Right. Again, Minister Mendocino deliberately misled and lied to Canadians when he indicated at committee and the House of Commons that people in Ottawa, in and around the area of the protests, were subjected to threats of rape, and they were supported by charges. Again, to your knowledge, no one was ever charged with rape itself or sexual assault or any threats of that nature, correct?
I am not aware of anyone being charged with sexual assault, but those level of detail I would not necessarily be aware of and would have to come rightfully from the Ottawa Police Service.
Thank you. Now, on the issue of the invocation of the Act, were you ever consulted by the government at any point in time regarding the mechanics and the tools available to the Act?
No, I was not, sir.
Did the OPP undertake any analysis of whether the legal criteria for invoking the Act had been met?
I wouldn't say that the OPP undertook any legal analysis. When the tools were afforded to us, we had our legal department review it and provide us advice as to how we could use those tools and how they would work in concert with the tools available to us through the EMCPA and the other authorities that were also available to us.
Thank you. How many charges did the OPP actually lay under the emergency measures regulations or the order itself?
I'm not aware of the OPP laying any such charges.
Thank you. Now, I understand that on the issue of the invocation of the Act, you had, prior to the Act being enacted, invoked, you weren't paying attention to the Act itself. You weren't seeking out information regarding the Act. You had no pre-warnings, no heads up, no consultation. You learned of it as it was happening.
Save and accept the conversation I had with Commissioner Lucky where she advised me that the federal government was considering it. That was many days prior to, but there was no advance notice, no heads up, no opportunity to review it. That's correct.
Yes, and that conversation with Commissioner Lucky took place on February the 5th, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
And you'd agree with Commissioner Lucky in an email that she sent to Mike Jones, a staffer to the government on the late evening of February the 13th, where she indicates that she's of the view that the RCMP have not exhausted all available tools that are already available through existing legislation. There are instances where charges could be laid under existing authorities for various criminal code offenses. The Ontario Provincial Emergencies Act just enacted will also help in providing additional deterrent tools to our existing toolbox. You agreed with that sentiment as well, correct?
I do, yes.
And on the issue of...
But you will have five
Sure.
more minutes.
Commissioner, it's been said that there has been a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and false information surrounding the group prior to arrival and while here. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, I would agree with that statement.
And in fact, one of your employees, Superintendent Pat Morris, also agreed with that sentiment. In fact, he described political and media depictions of the convoy as hyperbole and sensationalized. And in fact, an example of that is the Prime Minister, who slurred convoy participants as a fringe minority that should not be tolerated. You're familiar with that language?
I have heard that language, yes.
Later called them misogynists, later called them racists, that should not be tolerated. Morris testified on the contrary at the commission that his unit determined participants had a multitude of grievances and appeared to be mostly ordinary citizens with a large degree of support across the country. Do you support that?
I certainly would defer to Superintendent Morris for his more in-depth analysis of who was comprised of the demonstrators.
Okay. And that whole sentiment I'm going to put to you, Commissioner, was echoed by Mr. Barry McKillop, Deputy Head of FinTrack. You're familiar with that individual?
I am familiar with Barry, yes.
He indicated at previous testimony at this committee that there was no evidence of any illegal funding of the convoy, that most donors seemed to be ordinary people simply fed up with COVID restrictions. Do you accept that?
I accept that that was Barry's evidence.
Right. You'd agree with me that another example of dangers of misinformation occurred on February the 6th, where a downtown apartment dweller published a Twitter thread in which he described a pair of self-identified convoy protesters turned arsonists entering his building, taping up the door handles in the lobby, and then trying to burn the whole place down in a pyromaniac act of mass murder. Are you familiar with that particular incident?
I am not, sir, no.
This thread went viral, including from mainstream politicians and journalists. The actual man was arrested by the OPS, confirmed that the fire had absolutely nothing to do with the protesters, that the author had made it all up. But that didn't stop politicians and the media from exaggerating it, including members of this committee. In fact, former Mayor Watson jumped on the bandwagon, claiming that this event clearly demonstrates the malicious intent of the truckers' convoy. Journalists called it bone-chilling and horrifying. The NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and MP Charlie Angus cited the story as proof that the protester wanted to overthrow the government. The CBC radio invited the author of the hoax on its radio program. Former Minister.
Your time is up.
Thank you.